So good afternoon and welcome everyone to Virtual Training Institute 8.0. Welcome. So this afternoon's presentation is with Jay Arp and Betsy Lubich, and they are presenting on supporting SLIFE students in adult education, challenges and strategies. But before we get to their presentation, just a few housekeeping reminders that your proof of participation will come automatically from Zoom approximately 24 hours after this presentation. You will get a evaluation at the end of this presentation. So when it ends, just hold on for a little bit and that should pop up, and please fill out that information for us. And before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll. So that we know who is in the presentation with us. So if you could go ahead and just let us know what your role in adult education is, we would appreciate that. So the responses are coming in. Okay, so it looks like most of our participants are instructors, with a few instructional specialists and transition specialists. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now and share the results so that you can see the makeup of our participants. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Betsy for their presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Ramona, and good afternoon, everyone. We are here to talk this afternoon with you about supporting SLIFE students in adult education, and we're going to share some challenges and strategies. My name is Betsy Lubich, and my co-presenter.
I'm J. Andrea Arp.
And we're so
today.
Go ahead.
So today, do you want to go ahead into the next one?
So we're going to read this disclaimer from the Maryland Department of Labor that the content or opinions expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect or present the views, positions, or policies of the Maryland Department of Labor, nor does
We can't hear.
Yeah, Betsy, it sounds like your audio cut out.
We're having some tech issues right now. Sorry.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes, can hear you now. Thank you.
I'm going to drop the headset. So there's a little bit about our backgrounds and our experiences. Jay and I had the pleasure of co-teaching newcomer ELs together in a high school setting, and I told her she needed to join the world of adult ed, so she did that. Jay's going to go over our learning objectives for this afternoon.
Yes, first of all, we're hoping that by the end of this webinar that you can define who a SLIFE student is and how to identify a student as SLIFE, view SLIFE students as whole people, and identify supports that will help them reach their goals, explain how to create an optimal learning environment for SLIFE students, explain strategies for teachers to use to support SLIFE students, and leave the session with the links to resources.
Thanks, Jay. So we are going to give you a Mentimeter right now, and there will be a QR code on on the screen. And if you're able, if you have a mobile device and you're able to scan that and give us some input. And the question we want you to answer is, what do you think of when you hear the word or acronym SLIFE? Okay, so we'll see your answers in real time if you're able to scan that. If not, no worries.
If you can't scan it, then you can put your answer in the chat.
Yeah, great. SLIFE. Good. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer.
It's time for bread. I like a slice of bread.
No wrong answers.
No.
All right, so I'll read what we have so far, and we have somebody in the chat said always learning, interrupted schooling, pause, life, bread, slice, SLIFE, I get it. Interrupted, student for life, huh? Okay, we hope you're gonna walk out of here not saying huh anymore. And SLIFE, all right.
And we have one more in the chat. Vidya said students with limited formal education. And another one said voluntarily overcoming ignorance. And then we have education with interruptions.
Doing some introductions there, yeah.
I like that.
Great. Well, thank you for your responses. And you're gonna find out today what the acronym stands for and what are some ways that we can best come alongside these students in their journey.
Okay. So who are SLIFE students? We're going to take a little time to talk about who SLIFE students are for a few slides. The acronym is, it stands for Students with Limited or Interrupted Formal Education. As someone, who was it? Someone wrote in the, Vidya wrote in the chat. Sometimes the term that is used is SLIFE, and we saw that also in public schools. A lot of times they will use SLIFE. S stands for students, so technically it's redundant to say SLIFE students, but many of us do that anyways because it just seems to flow a little better. And we can go on to the next slide. Now, I like this quote to help us unpack the L in SLIFE. And this is a quote from Andrea DiCaprio, and I put you a link to her website because she has a lot of good information on SLIFE students. So this is what she says. The I in SLIFE refers to schooling that may have been interrupted due to war, natural disasters, migration, lack of educational facilities, cultural dictates, or lack of financial resources. Some SLIFE have found it necessary to absent themselves from school regularly to take care of family members or to work and help support their family. In some educational systems where students are required to pay fees and provide their own textbooks, families may have only been able to fund the first few years of schooling, or sometimes just one child in the family. Oftentimes that's a boy, not a girl. Okay. Okay, now let's unpack the I. The I in SLIFE, in the acronym SLIFE, refers to previous schooling. Students may have had experience that did not provide the same opportunities for learning as those available in the US. Some SLIFE may have attended the requisite years of schooling appropriate to their age, but attended schools that had few resources and or significantly different learning and teaching expectations than in the US. Okay, now more specifically, who are SLIFE in adult education? These typically are GED, ESOL, ABE students. Usually they're immigrants, and in some, sometimes they must be an immigrant in order to be considered SLIFE. we're going with a little more general use of the term here. They tend to be English language learners. They often have experienced extensive trauma, but not all have. Usually they're from subpar homeschooling or usually from some part foreign schools, but they might also be from homeschooling backgrounds where they weren't really homeschooled. If you've ever had any students like that, I have, or from some public schools that really weren't up to, let's say, Maryland standards. Sometimes these students have had some major illnesses in their life and they could not go to school for extensive periods of times and missed out on certain aspects of schooling that caused them to have gaps. And they also could have had classes interrupted by a worldwide pandemic. So a few of us have those students and have noticed that there's a big difference in the students today than of a couple of years ago. One of the challenges is that the grade level completion of SLIFE students can vary greatly. I've had an adult student who did not go to kindergarten and did not know her alphabet. And other SLIFE students maybe have just missed a year of school or just had some gaps along the way. But most of these students do have definite gaps in their educational background. Okay, this is continuing. We just looked at that from kind of a deficit perspective. So I'd like to look at this from a different point of view, because SLIFE students come with a wealth of knowledge and skills learned from informal education. Many have trade skills. I have a student right now who was in the textile industry from the time he was a child. Sometimes, or almost always, they've overcome great obstacles in their lives. Think about the students that have come in from other countries that have had to come here by themselves. I had one student, adult student, who literally walked and took whatever transportation he could from Africa to the United States because people were trying to force him into to be a child soldier. So you can think about the kind of resilience this young man has. Often they're multilingual. And another thing we need to keep into consideration is they may be going through several linguistic layers of languages before they can really attain English. For instance, if they don't know Spanish, they may know mom, and then they're trying to translate into Spanish, then in English, all at the same time. And there's different dialects. They may have academic language, but not informal language skills in certain languages. These all factor into how well they can do in your class. Okay, the next slide. What do we need to know about our SLIFE students before planning lessons? Now, this is ideal. And I am quoting here from Unite to Achieve. They're a very good company to look into also for some SLIFE materials. And some of the skills and experiences are, it's good to know their first language of instruction of literacy development. So that can help you to know a little bit more about them or maybe reach them in certain ways. We need to know about their former school experiences if possible, academic literary experiences, their English print and literacy experiences, and US schooling experiences, if any. So the next slide. Okay, then how do we identify them? This can be a little challenging. So I like to always be in control of the classroom if possible. And so I can control my information that I know about the students by giving them a poll or a survey. And this particular survey asks these questions that we just talked about. And it's a student intake form. You can see it there. And we have that linked below. And it asks those questions we just talked about. And it's very easy for them to fill out and gives us almost, immediate feedback on some of their background. It's very helpful. And then Betsy's going to talk about LACEs.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, and the student information form, if that has to be filled out audibly with a student, It most certainly can if you've got a student with significant limited literacy in, in whatever language. And then, Maryland is a LACES state, right? We use LACES to track data about our adult education students in the state, at least the Title II funded programs. And, on that LACES form, it will ask about prior schooling, how many years of schooling, especially as an English learner, how many years of schooling do you have from your country? And so, that whether or not your program gives you access to see the LACES form of the students in your class, if you're an instructor or not, you can get that information in other ways. You can get that, as Jay mentioned, through the student information form and just building community in your class and getting to know your students. That might not be something that students always want to disclose in front of other students, but it's something you can easily capture through a form. And I always tell students when I give that student information form, you and me are the only ones that are going to see this.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception to that is if you're in danger or something like that, or it's an abuse type situation, which unfortunately I have had that. So and that kind of gives students sometimes the freedom, right, to say, okay, nobody else is going to see this. So it's all fine and good to say who are SLIFE students, but it comes down to story, right? And the power of story. And so we are going to get into some challenges and strategies later. But we're each going to tell a story of a student that we've had, a SLIFE student that we have had. And so, because that's sometimes where we can see, a theory or a strategy that's been played out and that's worked in the classroom. And so we're going to sort of tell these stories, and then we're going to refer back to some of the strategies that were at work in these situations as we go on in the presentation. So I'm going to talk about a student named Maria. Maria is not the real name of the student, but it's a pseudonym. Maria walked into my high beginning ESL class at Frederick Community College in 2016. It's one of my first classes in adult education. Maria had a passionate desire to improve her English and especially to improve her English literacy skills. Maria had about a first grade education from a country in Central America. She struggled to identify letters and sounds in Spanish and English. Maria found our classroom to be supportive and affirming. Not once did I hear a student speak down to Maria for needing help with reading or writing. I pivoted, I converted some of the assignments that might have been only supposed to be reading or writing, and I made those optional. These can be audible, as to not call extra attention to Maria and her deficits of what she could not do, while at the same time encouraging her to push forward and grow. Maria received support and encouragement throughout the session from every single student in that class, the ones who were Spanish speakers and even the ones who weren't. And those students came alongside and gave Maria access to the material we were studying in class through their knowledge, and they expanded her access because of that. If she needed it repeated audibly, if she needed it translated into Spanish, they were there. And so that is, I'm going to refer to a strategy later that was in operation there with Maria in that particular class. And now Jay is going to talk about Julio.
Hi, my student's name is Julio, not his real name. Julio is almost 20 years old. He's an immigrant from Honduras and has had significant interrupted learning. He wants to improve his English very much, and he wants to also improve his academic standing. He's a quiet, very respectful and serious young man. I've taught him in 2 classes. One was a science class and one was a math class. I support his learning in several different ways. First, I group him, and you just heard from Betsy that she did some groupings. I think grouping is extremely important for these students, and I try to be very intentional in the grouping and put him with students with whom he works well. He is a very serious student, so I put him with other students who are serious and who will help him. He has one student with whom he typically works, and then also I put him into a larger group. So he works well when he has one person to pair, and then another bigger group to work together with other students. This particular group speaks Spanish. Sometimes I have other students in the class, but I have him in a Spanish only group. One thing that I really think helps is that at the very beginning of the year, I use icebreakers and team building activities at the beginning of the course to help students to get to know each other before they get really deeply involved in this work. So when they do work together, they already know each other a little bit and they're willing to work together better. And if you'll notice in the picture, Betsy did not refer back to this, but she's great at team building in the classroom. She's great at making students feel like they belong. And one of the things that she does that I was able to stop by and get some food this last time was she has a little night where they get together and share food together. And that's always wonderful for building classroom, rapport. Going back to Julio here, it's difficult for a 19-year-old young man to put himself out there to go every single day and struggle with this academic work and English on top of it, and work. So having that camaraderie in the classroom is very important to get him to come back, to keep coming back and keep working and pushing through. One of the things I like about the grouping is that it allows him to take what he's learning in English and discuss the materials that they're working together in Spanish before turning in a final project in English. And in this particular group that I have him in, the greater group, it's different levels of students. His English is quite low. I have him with other students who are on a little higher level, and they help him. And this helps him to access the material and then helps him to comprehend it in a really powerful way. The other thing is that adult students have a lot of stress, and sometimes we forget that they like games too. So one thing I like to do to add some engagement in the class is to have students, adult students, play some games. So I play a lot of different games like Quizlet, Kahoot, and other different ones that sometimes come with certain curriculums. He likes that. He also likes other educational technology programs that help him to access the curriculum. Some kids aren't so good at technology, but he really does a good job with that and enjoys it. And it helps him to be autonomous in his learning. So he has a little more control over when and where he does some of his classwork. And that's very important, as we know, for adult learners. To support his writing, I do various different things, but one thing I do is I use sentence starters and guided questions that really help quite a bit. In the last year, he's made solid progress in increasing his English skills and academic knowledge. So I think that these all these different skills strategies have been successful.
Thank you so much, Jay. And I just want to preface this picture by saying, check with your locations where you have class, and if you're not allowed to have food, don't have food. Okay.
Yeah.
I really struggled with locations like that, but I know there are, sometimes where your site might have, you might be on an off-site location. So, obviously you have to follow the rules and be mindful of that. So when we think about supports for SLIFE students, I want to talk about a number of things, because really this is institutional if you're in a community college, or it's an organizational if you're in a community-based organization. And it's really not, just in the classroom, right? But we are really, a lot of times, the point person as an adult education instructor for what are the resources out there in the community. I'm sure, those of y'all that are instructors, you've had students come to you, I need help with, blank, and something that they need help with that's completely unrelated to class. But it's something in, practically in their life that they need assistance with. And I love this quote by Dr. Luis Penton Herrera. And Dr. Herrera is, he was an EL teacher in Prince George's County Public Schools, and he's now an accomplished professor and author, internationally really known author and speaker. And he said, teachers should not be the only ones responsible for SLIFE students. This should be the entire staff who is involved. The entire institution is responsible for SLIFE students. And I have a link to some of to his website and some of his work in the list of resources we're going to give you at the end. So what are some of those practical resources in the community? Well, almost every county in Maryland has a literacy council, and oftentimes, students are able to go and receive a tutor. This is completely free, and a lot of times, these literacy councils are paid for out of the county budget, and they're able to get a one-on-one tutor, and they can meet up with that tutor. And it's not a trained teacher usually, but it's somebody that, they can have full attention from for an hour to a week. And many times these literacy councils are also offering workplace literacy classes, right? They're going into the workplace and they've somehow figured it out with the employer that, they don't have to miss time on the clock or miss a lunch break or whatever to have workplace literacy classes. And that helps to kind of overcome some of those barriers we think about, like scheduling, and Jay said, stress, and it makes those things available. So I never look at it as like it's, oh, you're coming to the community college or you're going to the literacy council. Like, take it all, all the resources that are out there. Family literacy, family literacy helps overcome that barrier of childcare, right? If parents have preschool age students, we have many family literacy programs in Maryland. Some are connected to Title II, others Judy centers and things like that. So there's opportunities there. Resources for parents within the local school systems. I know we have people here from other states, but I'm speaking mainly from experience in Maryland. School systems have language lines and translation for parent-teacher conferences, and community liaisons and positions like that. Many times they're multilingual. So there are resources if students have children in school, there are resources in the school system as well. Helping students connect to navigating paperwork and red tape. For business startups. I recently learned that the home improvement license examination in Maryland can be taken in Spanish, and it's open book. And some tests, even can be taken audibly. I know sometimes there are states where you can take your driver's license tests audibly, or even audibly in another language. So there are options out there. I was looking today on the cosmetology in Maryland, and there are tutorial guides in like 8 different languages. Now that doesn't speak specifically to SLIFE students, but it does help us know that there are resources out there for students if they're looking for help with, getting certified or starting a business. Also keeping good records and retention logs, how many people interact with a student. And so if we keep those records, we know we have a place we can go back to, right? If the instructor found out this information, or the intake and assessment specialist found out this information, we can put it on a log. And that way we know a little bit more about what's going on with that student, and that helps sort of that whole institution being there to support a student. Jay's going to talk a little bit about Larry Ferlazzo's some types of environmental factors that lead to intrinsic motivation in students.
Okay, you've probably heard of these before. It's nothing new, but I just want to point out that an optimal learning environment is especially important for SLIFE students. Many of them, some of them haven't been in school since third grade. Some of them maybe didn't have a great experience in school. So it's up to us to really have an optimal learning environment for them. And I think that SLIFE students tend to be a little more responsive to this than even other students that I've had. So the 4 types of environmental factors that lead to intrinsically motivated students are, and you know these already, relatedness, relevancy, competence, and autonomy. And in our stories, Betsy and I talked a lot about how some of the strategies that we used were really these strategies. We worked really hard on team building and then strategic grouping, as you can see. I think that is incredibly difficult, incredibly important for our SLIFE students, that our grouping is very intentional so that students work well together. For instance, I have an adult student that I have for the second time right now, and she is an older student who is hesitant with technology. And so I always place her with another student who is willing to help her. And when we use any kind of technology in the classroom, for instance, we use our phone sometimes to use QR codes. She always has someone there to help her who wants to help her. And then in turn, the last time she made friends with this younger woman, and they ended up having a friendship and helping each other out a little bit. Whenever we have adult students, we always want to have a lot of relevancy. You know, what's the need to know there? And so one thing I like to do is tie that relevancy into goals. And I know Betsy likes to do this too, that we help them to remember what's relevant about learning whatever subject that they're learning at this time. How is this relevant to their life by the goals that they want to achieve? It's important with SLIFE students that they see some progress. If they feel that the materials are too difficult, a lot of times they will shut down and stop coming to class. And then also, we talked about autonomy, and technology is one way that you can give more choice to students through technology. You can give more choice in reading, sometimes more choice in subject matter, what you're doing, or maybe even choice with what they're doing, a game versus working together in conversational groups. So those are all things that help us. If we keep these in the back of our mind, it helps us to better serve our students.
All right.
Next, oh, this is okay.
Are you done with that
I'm
slide
done.
today?
See, yeah, we're
Okay.
ready for you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
If you know who this is, please put the name of the person in the chat. Take a guess. Just give you a few seconds. If nobody knows, then that's okay. I love it. Henry Ford. It's not Henry Ford. I wish I knew. No idea. This was just for fun to get some audience engagement here. The guy who said each one teach one. Give me a clue. Okay. Soviet. That's your clue. I'll give you one clue. Soviet.
Soviet.
It's not Malcolm Knowles, but you know, that's a good idea. All right. What's some good? Oh, Susanna, you're getting warm there. Chomsky. All right. It's not Chomsky, but and this isn't a linguistic person per se, but this is Soviet psychologist. He died, I think, in like about 1930s.
Laura.
Okay, good job, Laura. It's Lev Vygotsky. All right, we have one winner. So this is Lev Vygotsky, and he is. Oh, you cheated. All right, Laura's my friend. I gotta give her some hassle later about that. I figured there was a way to cheat using AI or something, but all right. So one of Lev Vygotsky's philosophies and strategies was this idea, and this could be for language learning or any kind of learning, is that, it's really what I talked about earlier with Maria. It's this small inner circle representing what I can learn on my own. And, and then this outer ring outside of that is the gap between students' current level of development and the level they are capable of reaching with tools provided and with the knowledge of others. And so it's that whole idea of access, and it is mandatory that we do not take a student who's SLIFE in the classroom and say, oh, they can't do that, right? Okay, maybe they can't do that alone, but what can they do if we implement some strategies? And I'm going to share some more strategies in the next slide. What can they do with a technology tool? What can they do with the knowledge of others, right? And how can that broaden their access to material that maybe on their own is beyond their reach? And so I love to talk about zone of proximal development when we're talking about SLIFE students, because I think it illustrates the power of how, it's not up to, this isn't me sitting with a student all the time in class, but this is the community around them, giving them access to the material. So that is one strategy that can be used with students. And I think that was really in play with Maria. Building background knowledge, sometimes, like Jay said, that student, he's never been in a science class before, right? And so there's a lot more background knowledge that needs to be built than there would be with a student who has a solid educational background, using a lot of images, right? These are things all we know as those of us that work with English learners. There's so many technology tools, read to speak extensions, websites that offer a listening option. Sometimes you don't realize how much is out there till you go searching, because you have a student and you need to make some accommodations to make the material accessible. And so you find, oh, this is available with the listening option. Culturally relevant materials. What did I say about Maria? She felt affirmed, she felt empowered, and she felt supported. And if we are using culturally relevant materials, which is a passion of mine, in case you couldn't tell. But if we are using culturally relevant materials, students are going to feel a much more of a freedom to enter into the learning and to open up and to feel like their culture is being validated. Translanguaging. Now, this is, if you're in programs where it's against the rules to use the first language, then just scratch this one. And I hope there's no programs like that that are on this, but sometimes there are program administrators or people in charge that say only English in the classroom, but language learning is not linear. And sometimes a student, it's kind of like Jay was talking about, like discussion in Spanish, written final answer in English, but that thought process, right? That building background knowledge, sometimes happening in the first language of the students. And retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is a kind of this idea, and we can use it with vocabulary and lots of different things, but this idea that instead of like drilling a student before a quiz, just asking them to recall what they can remember. And there's been a lot of research. This is really big in Europe. There's been a lot of research that that shows that when you just have students sort of at unplanned, times, periods of time, just recall what they can remember. Sometimes it's called like a brain dump. Write down what they can remember or talk about what they can remember. That process of recall on a regular basis of what they've learned previously can actually create a better long-term retrieval. Just stopping here to see some comments. Great visual. Okay. Thank you. Yes, we frequently break the students into small groups to complete exercises. I love the notion that language learning is not linear. You truly never know what language a particular student may be processing in. And if you want to know more about translanguaging, I highly recommend the work of Dr. Ofelia Garcia. She's amazing. So, but those are some strategies we can use. And like I said, we have some links for you. We're going to put a resource page in the chat to give you some resources and links. But all of these are topics, if you're interested in, just go on YouTube and search for Dr. Ofelia Garcia, and you'll get a lot of videos. You can find out more. All right, Jay's going to talk a little bit about instructional technology and some things we can do to scaffold. You're on mute, Jay.
Okay, so I said, thank you, Betsy. I love using educational technology to support learning. I was first an English teacher, and when my students were able, I've been teaching for a while, when my students were first able to use Microsoft Word, to be able to do, to write their papers, it was a game changer. And at the very beginning, a lot of teachers did not like students using computers, but someone in the chat said that her or his zone of proximal, let's see, the zone, yeah, the zone was actually smaller because you can go online and find things. And so that's something that the zone of proximal development, for some reason, didn't want to pop out there for a minute. This helps to pull that together. This helps to open up students' worlds in so many different ways. But before we go on, I'm hoping that people are putting in the chat some of your favorite instructional technology apps. And so it looks like some of you are, and Google Images is one of them. And images are so important. WordWall. Oh yeah, Burlington Teachers. I don't know if most teachers are using Burlington English, but a lot are. And we also use Ventures at our school. Oh, Desmos. If you have access to Desmos, it is fantastic for math. Learning Chocolate. What's that? I don't know that one. Please explain Learning Chocolate. That sounds really good.
Yeah, they can explain it. They can't speak, but they can explain it.
Yeah. BE.
Yeah. Padlet.
English, yep. Padlet is great. Google Classroom, Jamboard. Yes. Quizlet. I love Quizlet. All these are good. Learning Chocolate. Thank you. Flippity. Okay. Those are all good ones.
Great.
Okay. So you've already, it looks like a lot of you are using Burlington, which is excellent. And then Ventures. For the lower level students, I have High Basic right now. I like last semester or in the spring, I taught Low Basic and High Basic with Burlington, and I didn't like it as well as I like Ventures right now. What I like about Ventures, one other thing is that it has a QR code. You can take the students can take their phone and get the QR code and go to the link for the audio, and they love that. And they can practice it at home, and gives them that autonomy that we were talking about that is excellent for adult students, and it's kind of fun. And then there's a lot of algebra tiles. I like those too, IXL. Okay. So we have different ones here. We have News and Levels. News and Levels is cool. Can you go to News and Levels and show people? How are we doing on time? Maybe we might not be able to get through all of these, but we're leaving the link for you guys to explore.
Yeah, News ELA.
At News ELA is great. It's anymore. It's like it seems like if you have to use the paid version. It used to be easier to use if you didn't have the paid version. This is great. It has different levels, 3 different levels. Students get to test their English quickly, and then they pick a level, and then they can practice their reading with this. So that's a nice program that you might want to check out. And let's go on to the next one. Rewordify. Have you ever used Rewordify? Anybody in here? I don't think so. Would you go to Rewordify? Rewordify, ChatGPT, and Diffit are similar. In Rewordify, what you do is you take a short passage and it rewords it for you. You can what it does is it actually rewords it to a lower lexile level for you. You have to check it, make sure that it's correct. You might have to go in and edit it a little bit, but it actually rewordifies the text for you. So it simplifies difficult English, and it can help you if you have a difficult text and you want to just word it in an easier way. We can do it ourselves, but it's just faster, and it's just a tool for us to use. Okay, so that's one to look into. ChatGPT is something I've been using this year. It's really fun. How many people are using ChatGPT? Anybody? Oh yeah, it's good for paraphrasing. Is anybody using ChatGPT? I love ChatGPT. And Betsy and I both use it. And I used it recently to make a little dialogue for my adult ed students, the high basic students. And I took the vocabulary for emergencies and I put it into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to make a dialogue with the teacher and students about emergencies. And it did. And I had a whole lesson plan done with a dialogue of a teacher and 3 other students, and a vocabulary and a quiz and some questions, open-ended questions, all within 5 minutes. So, oh, you're creating games for ESOL adults using ChatGPT. That's cool. There is a plagiarism issue, and it can be. The only thing is like when my students used to buy papers, essays, and turn them in, and I was like, you didn't write this. So you can kind of tell. So I don't know. It's got its pluses and minuses, but I think that it's one of those things that it's good to get on board with at some point, so we know what they're doing with it. Diffit. I love Diffit. I just found out about Diffit recently. Can we go there? Diffit is the easiest one to use because it's free. Okay, so it might not let you get in. Okay, and what you do is you can get leveled resources for, like it says, literally anything. What is nice about this one is you can upload an article URL and it will, rewordify all of it in different levels. And you can put in 5th grade, you can put in 10th grade, you can put in 3rd grade, and you can get different levels. So if you have different levels of students in your class, there's differentiation right there with questions, with multiple choice questions, with open-ended questions. It helps you to plan much quicker and in detail and make your plans so that they are exactly right for your students. There's also some text-to-speech AI that I linked in here, but I'm going to tell you honestly, I found this while just the other day, and I have not been able to really work with it, but I thought it was something that you might want to look at because it could be good for our students to use in the future. I know some of you said that you like Quizlet. There's also a game site called Blookit and Gimkit. Did anybody ever use that? Blookit or Gimkit? Those are fun. Adults love those. I was surprised how much they loved them. They really, every night I try to play a game because they're always looking forward to it. I see somebody says, I love Blookit. Oh, and ReadWorks. ReadWorks is excellent. I didn't put that in there. And CommonLit. CommonLit is another site that I like to use. And the last one here, we have choice projects. So I think that one of the things we can do with technology is give students a lot of choice in what they do, choice in what they read, choice in how they create projects. For instance, if you want to, you can use technology of cell phones, videos. There's all kinds of things that you can do with technology to not only scaffold reading, but to bring engagement and choice into the classroom. And there's just so many things we could say. That's enough for right now.
Yeah, just be careful, with some resources like ReadWorks and things like that that mention like a grade level or whatever. And sometimes, if it is a K-12, primarily a K-12 resource, you might have to look to make sure that the topics are relevant to, adult learners. I did notice with DFIT just quickly that you can lower the grade levels or the languages, but you have to sign up for an account, but it looks like you can link it to your Google account. So
it was free for me, and it also translates.
Yeah,
I don't know how good the translation is, but it does translate. We have a student, I have one of my students is Ukrainian, and I've used DFIT to help with some of that translation.
So we want to leave you this afternoon, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We want to leave you with a link for those resources that we mentioned, and this should be a document that is you can open and have access to. The resources, a lot of the resources we mentioned today are on this in this Google Doc. So questions, comments, things you'd like to say in the chat.
I'd like to say that we had a comment that it is very important to use materials that are appropriate for adults, and some of these you have to wade through them to find things that are right for your students.
Right. And and that's kind of because many adult education instructors are part-time. So there's been a lot more people paid to do research on K-12, and you can't just take K-12 research and put it and substitute it in for adults. You just can't do that. And you have to make sure that some things work and other things don't. Stanley says, this is all extremely helpful and exciting. Thank you. Looking forward to exploring these tools and resources. I can't wait to explore Rewordify. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. And I'm kind of playing double duty here. I do work at Maryland Department of Labor, but I'm here today with Jay in the role of an instructor. And so we're going to see if our wonderful host, Ramona, has anything else to tell us about the rest of VTI. So thank you all so much.
So first, I would like to thank Betsy and Jay. This was just a wealth of information. I know I learned so much. So thank you for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with all of us. And we do have more VTI sessions. I think we have another one after this one, and some more tomorrow and Wednesday and even Thursday. So please take a look and sign up for any presentations that look interesting to you. And as I mentioned earlier, once we end the session, you will get an evaluation form. So please fill that out. We appreciate the feedback. And again, thank you to Betsy and Jay. Really appreciate your sharing all that wonderful information and resources with us. So everybody have a good evening, and we hope to see you in more VTI sessions.
Thank you. Bye.